Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Watson, and my serial killer project was done on Nannie Doss, who is nicknamed the Giggling Granny. Doss is classified as a Black widow, and she's one of the more lesser known female serial killers in the United States. It's assumed that she's committed up to 11 murders, all close friends and family members, but she only admitted to killing 4 husbands. She had 5 husbands total. She was dubbed the Giggling Granny because of her demeanor during the interrogation process. A brief overview of her childhood. She was born Nancy Hazel to Jim Hazel and Louisa Holder Hazel in Alabama in 1905. She had what was reported to be a controlling and sometimes abusive father, and she also endured head trauma during a train accident where she was thrown out of her seat and hit her head on a metal pole. And it's been reported that this drastically changed her demeanor as a person. She, after this time, was obsessed with the idea of romance and loved reading romance novels and magazines. Doss married her first husband, Charles Braggs, at the age of 16, and they had only known each other for 4 months. Together they had 4 children, but Braggs was reported to be also abusive and controlling like her father. Later on, her middle 2 children mysteriously passed away, and it was deemed that they suffered from food poisoning. Later, investigators believe that maybe she suffered from Munchausen by proxy and did not mean to kill her daughters, only to make them ill to get attention from others and to appear as a doting mother. After their deaths, Braggs took his eldest daughter and ran, only to later return demanding a divorce in a exchange for returning their eldest daughter. And the two divorced, and later Braggs became the only spouse to survive a relationship with Nannie. Melvina, who was Nannie's eldest daughter, continued to live with Nannie, and she later married and gave birth to 2 sons. Her second son, shortly after giving birth, had passed away. Melvina was under the influence of drugs and recalled witnessing her mother stab a hairpin into the brain of her son hours after he had been born. But due to the medicine that she had been taking because of the pain of giving birth and going through labor, she remained silent on this matter because she was unsure if what she had seen had really occurred. Her first child passed away shortly after this, also under Nannie's care. This quote from the Giggling Granny, Nannie Doss, 2021, said, "There could have been no further doubts when, just a few months later, Melvina's firstborn Robert also died, once again while being looked after by his grandmother. The physician believed he had stopped breathing somehow and did not raise the possibility of foul play, despite the fact that Nannie had taken out a life insurance policy on young Robert a few months before his untimely death." Nannie later met her second husband, Frank Harrelson, through the Lonely Hearts column of the local newspaper. According to Harvey, Harrelson was an abusive alcoholic, but it was difficult for Doss to leave the relationship, and they remained married for 16 years. However, in 1945, their relationship came to an end when Harrelson came home drunk and raped Nannie. The next day, Nannie topped off his bottle of moonshine with rat poison, and he died. The death appeared to have been food poisoning, and so no suspicion of foul play occurred. Doss then moved to North Carolina after his death. Moving to North Carolina, Nannie Doss met her third husband, Artie Lanning, also through the Lonely Hearts column of the newspaper. Lanning was known in their community to have been a womanizer and was known to also be unfaithful to Nannie. Lanning consequently died due to what was deemed heart failure, and no autopsy was done, no foul play was suspected. Doss then moved to Kansas after staying with her sister Debbie for a few months. Then also met her fourth husband through the Lonely Hearts column of the newspaper. During this marriage, Nannie's father had passed away, so her mother had moved in with the two newlyweds. Her mother, however, shortly complained of stomach aches and then later passed away under Nannie's care. And only 3 months later, Nannie spiked her husband's coffee with arsenic, and he passed away as well. Nannie Doss met her fifth and final husband also through the Lonely Hearts column in Oklahoma. Doss was reported to be a pious and religious man, but also controlling of matters such as their finances. He forbade her from reading any of her romance books and magazines. But aside from this, he was not abusive and was always faithful to her. But feeling restricted in the relationship, Nannie left Samuel and moved to Alabama. However, in an attempt of being a good husband, Samuel begged for Nannie to take her back. This quote from the Giggling Granny 2019 said, "In what would become one of the biggest mistakes of his life, Sam begged his estranged wife to return to him. He even vowed to loosen his hold on the money and took out 2 life insurance policies on himself with his wife as his beneficiary." After the two had been reunited, Nannie attempted to poison her husband's prune cake and coffee, but she mismeasured the amount of arsenic that she gave him, and though he was taken to the hospital for several days, he survived the first poisoning attempt. After being released from the hospital, Nannie tried again and served him a very large meal upon his return from the hospital, and Samuel Doss was dead as of the next morning. When Samuel Doss's body came back the next day to the hospital, his doctor, Dr. Schwolbein, became concerned. He needed Nannie's consent to perform an autopsy, and surprisingly, Nannie consented to this autopsy. According to Green, the author of The Black Widow, this was because the doctor had used peer pressure by approaching her in a public space, urging her to consent due to the mysterious nature of Samuel's death. Consequently, the autopsy revealed an enormous amount of arsenic in Samuel's system, and Doss was promptly arrested. The interrogation of Nannie Doss was rather odd and confusing for the interrogators. According to the Giggling Granny 2019, Doss was glued to her romance magazine the whole time, so much so that they had to confiscate it from her. After this, she would not stop giggling during the interrogation, and she even flirted with several of the interrogators. They were confused about her behavior given the circumstances, and this is where her nickname, the Giggling Granny, comes from. Finally, after hours, Nannie made a confession to Special Agent Ray Page, according to Green 2019. She confessed to killing Samuel and only agreed to discuss her other husbands on the condition that they gave her back her romance magazine. Though Doss did not admit to any of the other murders that were associated with her, they had enough evidence to incriminate Doss for a sentencing. After Doss's confession, they exhumed all of her victims, and arsenic was found in the majority of their systems, and those who did not have arsenic in their systems were found to have suffered from asphyxia. They had a panel of psychiatrists evaluate her, and from all angles, all psychiatrists found her to be sane. This quote says, "Try as they might, they could not find grounds to bar her from standing trial based on her mental health. She was sane, and her actions had clearly been calculated and deliberate, not acts of passion." Her lawyers were unable to develop a defense for her, so there was a brief hearing under Judge Elmer Adams, and then he sentenced her to life in prison. According to Geringer, the judge decided against the death penalty due to her being elderly and female. Doss later died of leukemia in prison in 1965. Throughout her life, Doss had been killing others around her for either insurance money or for the sake of comfort. Her whole life she had desired a perfect romance, and when her life circumstances did not align with this idealized romantic life, she would kill them.